So, Berto, have you heard of MGTOW or men going their own way or MGTOW or this sort of thing? Have you heard of? I
have come across the term. Yes,
men going their own way.
I didn't know how to pronounce it until you just said it.
Well, I've heard it said MGTOW, but
yeah, I thought it was like a band, like MGMT, but
just a little bit different. Yeah. Well, that's what I want to talk about today because people are asking us to weigh in on it. What do you say?
I think it's a great idea.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I, would like to think I'm going my own way. I mean, what other way could I go, really?
Like Frank.
Yeah. I am a therapist and a professor. Who are you, Humberto?
My name is Humberto Castañeda. I make sandals for ice.
Sandals for ice. Men going their own way. It's mostly an online community from what I can tell. Mm-hmm. It's a community that is actively rejecting romantic relationships with women. Men going their own way says, by implication, it's like I'm moving away from women.
Yeah.
Because they believe that women just use men and that the system is currently set up to privilege women over men and that our society is emasculating men but
it doesn't necessarily mean that they go with other men. Like they don't necessarily go homosexual.
Right. Okay, so that's what I want to talk about today. But first, I want to just say a caveat here from the beginning. If you're a dude who is into the men going their own way community, or you are sympathetic to the cause, because I'm gonna call this MGTOW. So if you've clicked on it, I beg you to listen to this episode, partially because I've had episodes where I have addressed people in this population before and feel that this isn't going to be an episode railing against MGTOW. It's going to be trying to look at it from a critical perspective, but also an empathetic perspective. Mm-hmm. As a fellow man, I get it. I've been hurt. I've been in pain. I've wanted to go my own way.
Yeah.
I've wanted to give up. I have given up.
Yeah.
I've had the exact same impulses when I was in pain. I've experienced the rejection, insecurity, and also I've experienced sexism from women.
Sure.
I'm a professor at a university that teaches psychology and psychotherapy, and I'm here to tell you that sexism against men is a thing.
Right.
So, now we could, talk about the bigger implications of that. But, for a woman to treat a man unfairly because he's a man is not foreign to anyone.
Right.
So, that happens. And there are measurable things that you could point to in society that are happening to men. So, and as a man who can't stand on a pedestal of being a professor, if you're out there, you might not be able to feel like you can voice those concerns, or you don't voice them well enough so that people can hear them. You state it and people say you're a sexist or there's something wrong with you or whatever. And so, I get it. I've been there.
Right. And I mean, part of this is that there is no guarantee in society, definitely not by law, let alone by even common understanding, that you will be paired with someone, let alone someone you like or someone you get along with.
But that's what the movies and the internet they say. You just gotta be a good guy,
right?
And you'll meet the perfect person,
right? And
they will see you and love you,
right?
And you're good.
Yet the reality is, no one's under obligation to like you, and not only that, there are many forces working against you finding someone you can maybe get along with enough to form a long-term relationship with.
Yeah.
Many of them not within your control, some of them within your control. And
right.
Yeah.
For men, women, queer, non-binary, everyone, it's this, you ask anyone, they're going to say, man, dating is rough.
Yeah. And
I've been at it for years, and I was in a long-term relationship. It didn't work out, and I feel like I kind of wasted my time. So I've been there. Early on in my career, I remember there were moments when, because I didn't really understand the forces of society and didn't really understand what it was like to be a woman in our society, I still don't, but I have more kind of data gathering. There were times when I was just like, does our society, is it against men? There were times when I absolutely felt that way. I would be in psychology. I mean, take it from me as someone who is in psychotherapy, particularly marriage and family therapy. It's dominated by women. In my early training, I'd be like, I'd be the only man. So I was in a second quarter, Antioch University. We're in a multicultural perspectives class where we talk about gender a lot. And I'm the only man in the room. There's 19 women and a woman professor, and we're talking about gender, and people are venting their feelings, and they're talking shit about men, men this, men that, and I'm just sitting there trying to act invisible.
That sounds familiar.
Just trying to be invisible, of just being like, oh my God, I hope no one looks over at me and realizes that there's a man in the room, because I don't want them to feel bad about saying these things, and I don't want them to be looking at me like, well, I wonder what he's going to do about this. It felt bad. So I get it. It can happen, but there are different ways to cope with that, and many ways to cope with that. And also, if you want to go your own way and you want to take a break, or even a forever break from romantic relationships with women or whomever, that is great. Go for it. There's nothing wrong with that. It's advisable sometimes, but the things that are associated with that are on the internet, which we will get into, that is what we're going to attack. Yeah. We're not going to attack men going their own way. We're not going, or I'm not going to attack the idea that you've been hurt. I'm not going to attack the impulse to try to cope. I'm not going to attack the idea that as a man you may have been discriminated against in some circumstances. I'm not going to attack that, because that's all reasonable. Yeah. But we are going to attack, I am going to attack the things that are associated with it that, to me, it's like you go to a rally downtown Seattle that's, anti-capitalism, or trying to raise awareness for, poor people and inequities, and the government being in corporate pockets. These are well-known phenomenon that most people can understand. Yep. And so people are protesting. You got people holding signs. You got, soccer moms, soccer dads trying to raise awareness that, they're putting in their time. And then you get some, elements that...
Some rabble-rousers.
Yeah. That come and they grab all the headlines, and they're breaking in windows at Starbucks. They
destroy stuff. They might injure people.
Right. Yeah. And that's what ends up ruining the movement sometimes, because it makes all the 99.9% of the others, it makes them look like they're vandals.
And it calls the premises into question.
Right.
Unnecessarily so.
Right. Which, of course, that's what the corporations want. And, of course, the news programs will focus on it because they're in corporate pockets. Yeah. And, now after the whole Russian trolling Trump election thing, it makes me wonder, back before, I wouldn't believe that there would be conspiracy theories. But there are actually things happening where I wouldn't doubt that, like, corporations would pay, like, 10 dudes to like break shit, and to like cause, who knows. But anyway, so same with men going their own way. The average guy who's lost, hurt, looking for answers, totally fine. But then there's this element that gets tagged on to men going their own way that I find to be extremely problematic. Okay, so this is an email from an anonymous patron. They write, Dr. Honda, I want to thank you for your very helpful podcast, specifically the pickup artist community and how to meet women episodes. So those are the episodes in which we talk directly to very similar kinds of... So How to Meet Women was an episode I did by myself that addressed a particular listener in this sort of arena.
Didn't we do one on this topic?
The pickup artist community, yeah. He goes on, they all helped me a lot personally. I'm a 40-year-old male with depression and anxiety issues. Recently, I had sex with a woman I had just met. And like you said in the episode, it was not a great sexual encounter. Moreover, I felt rejected when she left and didn't text me back. I didn't feel like a magical alpha male afterwards. I felt pretty much the same as I did before. Anyway, it would be great if you could do some more episodes along these lines, maybe one on MGTOW. Right. So what he's referring to is in previous episodes, I would talk about how the whole idea that I think the whole reason that men are doing this sort of pickup artist community, MGTOW, this kind of stuff, is because all of us, men and women, queer people, we all, for the vast majority of us, we desire companionship, romance, connection, attachment, dedication, loyalty, friendship, something to do on Saturday night, someone who likes us, someone who respects us, someone who prefers us over other people, someone who is there for us when we need them. When we need a ride to the hospital, they're there, no questions asked. We all want that, right?
Right.
And so, but because our society teaches men growing up that there is a very particular version that they're open to actually that they can actually move towards, right? Like men are taught to be tough and not to care about relationships, but to want sex all the time, but not to be vulnerable. And so there's all these weird messages that are really anti-human. And then men emerge into life and they try to be a man, right?
Yeah.
They're like, I'm going to be a man. I'm going to be tough. I'm not going to be vulnerable. I'm not going to care about anything. I'm John Wayne. I don't give a shit about anybody. But deep down, I give a shit about everybody and I really want a relationship.
There is biological level to this too.
Yeah.
Like there is a sense in which, especially when you hit those teen years, you start seeing more differentiation on the aggression levels, and the hormones play a big role, let's say, in splitting the behavior a bit more. And then you tack on society on top of it all. And it's sort of, one of the things that come to mind is that we are still operating largely in the selection kind of process that I think genetically worked fairly well for our evolution, in that, like you need to sort of pick the strongest, healthiest, most able to protect kind of mate if you're a woman, and so forth, and men would select for what they select for. Yet we have a society where weak but smart and otherwise functional individuals don't have to die at 17 in a war. Well, not in every place, but we have a society that actually more people are alive in well into the late stages of life. And yet we don't have like the empathy or understanding as a society and a culture to say, you know what, there is something beyond just selecting a reproduction partner. There's associating with other people, having a fun sexual experience, having all these things that doesn't have to all be connected to, the best genetic decision as a species. And so we don't have that language of, well, maybe I could go out with this person. Maybe I could even have sex with them, even though they're in the scale 1 to 10, maybe they're only a 7 for me, but that's okay. And their performance doesn't have to like be mind blowing. It's just got to be fun. And that nuance is not really something we are accustomed to. We imagine if I go on a date and it's not like the one, like it was a waste. And if I have sex and it's not like those scenes in the movie, like that's a waste, and so forth. And there's no like, oh, that was fine, that was okay. That was like, when you rate movies and you're like, that was a 6, that was pretty good. Rating something as a 6 in the dating world would be disastrous.
Yeah, I totally get it. Not touching on some of the evolutionary psychology stuff that you mentioned, which there's evidence that refutes kind of the general premises of what you're saying, which we won't go into. Okay. I mean, the idea that men are a little bigger because of sexual selection is, makes sense, but, exactly what behaviors weight-wise that actually meant in the old days, we just don't know. There might have been a lot more cooperation and a lot less distinct roles between men and women as we evolved. But anyway, certainly in previous generations, there were extreme differences in roles that were mainly dictated by industrialization. But anyway.
Even if you wrote all that out, all the genetic stuff out, even if you just took it as it's all society right now, the fact of someone saying subconsciously or consciously, I need to pick a mate that is very powerful in our current society limits the rest of the relationships that person and other people can have with that person, right? Because it predisposes you to think, yeah, I can't go on a date with this loser. I can't do that with that guy because they're not a head of a company, or they're not really wealthy, or they're not a successful doctor, or all these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so even if it's all society, that mentality of like, it's so much weight behind it. My decision affects the rest of my life.
Right. And from a man's point of view, sometimes distorting the importance of that.
Sure.
I need to have this and that in order to get a woman, when that is one, maybe not true, and two, like, even if it was true, it's empty and materialistic and doesn't actually get to the grid. As we're talking about it, I think I finally figured out what the issue is. The issue is that when men and women, we'll just say, for the sake of argument, well, let's just say any homosexual or heterosexual or queer, doesn't really matter. Women are in general socialized differently than men. We know that, right? And so when a man at the age of 25 gets dumped, he goes on 10 dates with a woman, he's fallen in love, and he's like, this is going to be the one. And she just says, sorry, I don't think this is working out. I'm breaking up with you. And you're devastated. Okay. So a man in our society and a woman in our same, so say, two people, same exact circumstances.
Sure.
The woman is socialized to reach out for help, maybe even go to therapy, to cry, to be emotional. Now, men and women, everyone is socialized and shamed for emotion in general.
Sure.
It just so happens that men are shamed a lot more than women are. So men in that situation, they're socialized to get angry, and they're socialized to not ask for help, and they're socialized to drink more alcohol, and they're socialized to act tough, like they don't care. I don't need women. I can go my own way. I don't need this shit anymore, right? Yeah. And then what do you do, especially if you don't have a lot of friends and you're not actually like interacting with society? Well, where is your one human attachment, human interaction gonna be? It's on the internet.
Yeah. And
the internet, I'm just from experience, has a vastly overrepresentation of misogyny on the internet. It is like, we could speculate. Do you have any idea why that is?
Well, for one thing, it's not necessarily true that the participants of the internet are by and large misogynist, but the vocal ones we come across do seem to be by and large misogynist.
And I would also say that the people who participate more visually on the internet are more likely to be, your average soccer mom isn't posting public things on the internet, whereas I find that, the people who like the internet a lot and sort of use it as a platform for communication publicly, it just seems like there's a greater percentage of misogynists. By misogynist, what I'm talking about is not like someone who's evil. I'm talking about someone who has been hurt by women, and they've turned to the internet for a solution, for comfort, and they find other hurt men on the internet. I think I'm developing an hypothesis right now. It's like, men are socialized to work with computers, to be more sort of electronical, to be more in their room isolating video games. And
that you've got all the burden of proof ahead of you on that one.
What?
Are we socialized that way? I don't know if we are.
Absolutely, we're socialized to do that. It's much more of a masculine teen thing to play video games than it is
But how does society shape that?
Society, through advertising, through marketing, through gearing an Xbox towards boys and not towards girls, by having video games that are geared towards boys and not girls.
No, having seen indirectly, of course, what industries such as those have tried to market to different segments, it is not an easy thing to tackle.
Certainly, and just because. Let's say, forget about the marketing effort. Let's say the marketing effort was awesome. There's still society.
Well, let's have a chicken and egg problem.
Why do girls wear? So we'll never be able to know.
Yeah,
but
you
anyway,
have a chicken and egg problem.
Forget I said. Anyway, the point is that I'm developing an hypothesis about
So people get, so more men, definitely, no matter what, it is true. More of these young men are online playing kind of violent video games and
they're young men,
so
so they're dating and they're getting hurt.
Yes.
And they're just repeatedly being dumped or hurt or worried. And so instead of calling their friend or texting their friend or talking to their mom or talking to their aunt, they're going online to kind of communicate with random people because they might not even have any friends in their real life because they haven't been socialized to do that.
Right.
And so they go online, and it becomes insular. Essentially, you have millions of young men who are cooped up in their rooms and are afraid of going outside. And it's a system, so there's no input. You know, it's not like you have this super vocal, reasonable feminist voice on the internet. You know what I mean? That's the one thing that really bothers me about feminism feminism in my world is a wonderful, careful, inclusive, non-annoying voice. Every feminist in my world, including myself, is not shrill, is caring. And I have super feminist colleagues who say things that I find myself as a feminist going that doesn't sound very so but that voice isn't on the internet. What the voice is on the internet, or at least what gets highlighted, is this super shrill anyway, my point is
uncompromising, sort of
hateful, almost like anti-man, and so that isn't to say that there aren't wonderful feminist voice on the internet, but anyway, my point is that I think that's what happens, and then something like men going their own way gets developed. It's so let's get into some of the things about MGTOW. So sometimes it's called the manosphere. It's somewhat related to the men's rights movement. Yeah. Somewhat related again to the pickup artist or seduction community. I just love that, the seduction community. Okay, well, what do you think men going their own way, what do you think their belief system is?
Let me see. I don't know real firsthand what it is, but I would guess there is, it's sort of impossible or very difficult to relate to how women think. As a result, we're sort of going to skirt that issue and basically just deal with men. And we're going to find our own meaning that is not dependent on women or something along those lines.
Yeah, they talk about gynocentrism, which is what I talked about earlier, is where women are privileged over men in our society.
Oh, right. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, they also basically, I would say, and I don't even know if they disagree with me, that they believe that women are evil. The way when we get into this,
evil?
Yes, when we get into this, you'll actually, I'll convince you because
I'm not disagreeing.
It just sounds weird, right?
I'm not disagreeing that women are evil. I'm not disagreeing. I have no idea whether they think or not. I'm just shocked that it's wow.
Yeah.
They think they're evil.
Yes. They cheat. They use you. They know how to manipulate you. Oh. Every single woman knows how to, they break you down. Also, they believe that if you're a male feminist, you're a pussy. They have these words like white knights.
Oh, cuck.
Cuck, social justice warriors.
Betas.
And politically, where do you think most of these people lie?
Well, so it's a funny question. Having been involved in 4chan a long time ago, I always considered them at least left, at least a little left of center. In some cases, libertarians, right? Right now, it seems like there's this weird combination of extreme right with some libertarian tendencies.
Yeah, right. So,
but I don't know if that's true of this community. I'm just talking about what I've noticed happens with a lot of the what I would call the 4chan toxic male part.
Yeah, right. Well, perceptions are that, and word has it, I don't know, research, I don't know if even anyone's looked into it, but they tend to be more alt-right, far right. Okay, looking at their website. Their website, just to let you know, it looks like it's designed by someone who doesn't know how to make websites. There's a history tab. So it's history of men going their own way. That'll be interesting. it has nothing to do with history. It's just a screed. It's like a manifesto.
Oh, okay.
There's nothing about history. There's not a single.
Here's how
date.
it started. Here's what.
Yeah, there's like nothing.
Okay.
No figures. It's just. I mean, they talk about historical figures like Nikola Tesla is quoted.
Oh, I see.
Here's a quote: "I do not think you can name many great inventions that have been made by married men. Be alone. That is the secret of invention. Be alone. That is when ideas are born." So apparently, who knows if Nikola Tesla actually said that?
Sure.
But yeah, sounds like a men going their own way kind of guy.
Yeah. It is not incompatible with the thought that the more distractions you have, the less you can fully devote yourself to a project, any kind of project. And so if you have a family, if you have children, and you want to be involved with that family, you will literally have less time for everything else.
Right.
So if you want to sort of be a 24/7 inventor or someone who's like diving super deep in something, yeah, the less distractions, better. Now, it doesn't mean it makes you a more well-rounded person. You might not live as long, all these other things. But, pragmatically speaking, sure.
Yeah, you might cry yourself to sleep every
Yes.
And that's the whole trickery of society that is being played on men, that to be a great person, to live a good life, you need to be a Nikola Tesla, who, in apparent, just to cartoonize his life a little bit, he invents all the time and he's always pushing back against the man, and he doesn't have time for women or kids or stuff. Now, I'm not saying you need to have a woman and kids. I'm just saying that it's counter to biology that you can live without human attachments. You will become more depressed. You will eat more food.
Yeah.
You will have lower self-esteem. You will have less meaning in your life. In general, okay,
Right.
Certainly there are exceptions.
Although they might counter, yeah, we have plenty of attachments. They're just men.
And that's fine. That's great. Actually,
Right.
totally. That's a totally valid way to live your life. If you're like, you know what, romance is not my thing. I am going to bond with these other MGTOW people, and that's going to be my life. I'd be like, totally cool, man.
Yeah.
Just why do you have to involve all the hatred? Like, if you want to have men's night, if you want to have it's a men's club and women aren't invited, or it's a group of dudes who are like, we're dedicated to no romance.
Yeah.
Great. Play video games with each other.
Yeah.
Hang out, go to movies, do a podcast together, do whatever you want. But why does that have to be associated with some of the stuff we're going to get into? So on their website, it says, MGTOW is a statement of self-ownership where the modern man preserves and protects his own sovereignty above all else. So in that statement, what do you think about that statement, Bruno?
That sounds sort of a bit libertarian, also a bit of, I imagine in there, if you read it one way, it almost sounds like just a declaration of basic rights like you would have seen in the Declaration of Independence.
Right.
But there's this subtle thing about, men are declaring this.
yeah. But, on its face, it's fine.
Sure.
It's like the modern man preserves and protects his own sovereignty above all else.
Yes.
It's like, okay. Next, refusing to bow, serve, and kneel for the opportunity to be treated like a disposable utility. And again, I'd be like, okay, great. Yeah, don't bow, serve, or kneel to be treated like a disposable utility. I live my life by that creed as well.
Sure.
And living according to his own best interests in a world which would rather he didn't.
Yeah, and that's where we start running up into the shores that I don't think are actually great. Liberty, we have this illusion, right? Because we have this thing of all men are created equal and they're free, right? By default, we're free. Okay. But words are just words. In practical reality, what the words mean is what really matters, or how we apply it is what really matters.
Yeah.
And so how are we free? Well, we're free in some ways, but if we define freedom as truly the capability of doing anything at any time that our mind desired, well, that's already physically impossible, let alone societally impossible, or the other way around. And so we look at it already like we're not truly free. Like if we define freedom as I want to fly to the moon right this second, well, I can't do that. That's physically impossible. Then you can bring it back down to earth and say, all right, well, I want to go out in a shooting spree. It's like, no, actually, that's illegal. You're not allowed to do that. And then you can even dial it down to, I want to scream fire in a crowded theater, stuff like that. There are things that you still are not allowed to do.
So are you saying that this creed is kind of saying maybe if taken too far, it would become destructive in someone's life?
To society and maybe even to themselves.
Yeah, right. I would argue to themselves more likely.
Sure.
And society, also. So, but, on its face, nothing wrong with, I want to live according to my best interests. All right. But then it says, in a world which would rather he didn't. And that's just like...
That's a twisty twist.
That's a weird thing to believe.
Right.
That the world is against men and trying to like ruin men's lives.
Sure.
Because I, as a man, do not feel that way at all. I mean, if I just went according to my gut feeling, I would say that, I'm treated normally. But when I actually look at research, I realize that as a man, I'm treated better in a lot of instances. There are certain situations where I'm treated worse, for sure. If I want to become a nurse, for example, there's going to be some discrimination. Mm-hmm. If I want, I don't know, but I just
ballet dancer, other things. I don't know. There's probably different roles and professions in which
different
people
contexts
might look at you funny.
Yeah, different contexts. You go to a PTA meeting in a conservative neighborhood and you're the only father there, then you're going to get some different reactions, maybe positive, maybe negative. But under most circumstances, according to research, I benefit, but I don't feel that. It's not like I walk around going like, ooh,
here's money.
that really benefited me. But so if I gut go, it's like I'm treated normally. So I don't have any sense that the world is somehow against me. That's what's so interesting, and what I think happens to some of these people on the internet is they pass around stuff that we're going to get into that actually freaks them out. I think it's so weird that the propaganda pockets that people live in, like the propaganda pocket I live in, is what I would call the average liberal propaganda pocket. That has just a ton of messaging around the democratic or the liberal agenda, shall we say. And some of it is wonderful, like global warming is real and corporations aren't always great and these kinds of messages. But some of them I find to be extremely problematic, the bubble that I'm in, like Trump is ruining our country, we're all going to die in a nuclear war, which of course, maybe, but
you're saying it's not healthy. It's not a healthy.
I'm saying that I, as someone who lives in this pocket, hears those things and I'm just like, well, I don't know if that's accurate. And so the pocket that the MGTOW people live in on the internet would actually lead you to believe that the world is against men because of the things that they say. Okay, so just getting into some of the things that they say. There's a quote on their front page that says, "He sexually harassed me is the new he didn't call."
Oh, jeez. Okay.
So, so they're saying that like, don't go out there and date women because if you don't call her back, she's going to say that you sexually harassed her
or even raped her or something.
Right. Yeah. So the fact that someone would write that on the front page of their website tells me you live in a propaganda pocket that is very different from mine and probably different from reality, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that's not some random commenter. That's like front and center,
This also, it's interesting. There's two ways to interpret this. One of them is that this population used to go out and was sometimes exposed to not, when they didn't call some of their dates, they would get back, "Why didn't you call me?" Or "I'm upset that you didn't call me." And that more recently, they're starting to notice that now they're being accused of sexual harassment for the same behaviors as before. That's one way to interpret it, right? Which I guarantee you is not the truth.
Right.
The other way to interpret it is that in some time they weren't participant to, there was this like, oh, you didn't call me, I'm upset. And now the part they're participating in, they're like, why am I getting accused of sexual harassment all the time?
Right.
And what's interesting about that is it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if they are in fact sexually harassing people all the time, they're going to be told they're sexually harassing people all the time. And they're not going to have a comparison basis where they used to not get told they were sexually harassing people.
Right. And I, as a man, and men, you and me, men,
Right.
You know,
Men going our own way.
men going our way.
Yeah.
I don't know why that's just such a funny visual for me, like you and me going our own way.
All it makes me think is the Two Snaps guy, movie reviewers.
I just don't know where we would go. But, you know, it's terrifying to be in the world today with the prospect of being accused of sexual harassment or rape or something.
Sure.
I mean, one tiny little accusation that sounds credible and our reputation is completely gone.
Right.
That's terrifying. And now, the vast majority of people who even do rapes and sexual harassment never get called out on it. So
Yeah.
it's like, chances are we're okay,
Right.
you know? And I would like to hope that justice would prevail if that ever did happen, you know?
Sure.
We got to take a break, so I'll continue this when we get back. All right, we're back from the break. If you haven't become a patron of the podcast, do so now. Go to patreon.com. Don't be lazy, people.
Do not be lazy. Go your own way. Go our way.
My point is that I get it, men
Sure.
in MGTOW, that you're worried that you're going to be falsely accused.
Yeah.
Totally get that too. And I don't know the solution to that. And I don't feel like our society really has a solution for that yet.
Right. We don't have a good system in place. We had a bad system of not reporting and not listening and all these things. Right now we're running into a new problem that's probably not as bad of a problem, but it's a new problem, which is, okay, but now how do we not overreact? How do we maybe have empathy for different sides of
Totally,
this,
yeah.
all these things?
Now, I would estimate that on the scale of things, the amount of people, men and women, who are still silenced by power because who have been harassed, raped, harmed, either physically or sexually, is like 1 billion to 1.
Sure.
In terms of the false accusation, reputation ruining situations.
Yeah.
Like there was, what's his face, Aziz Ansari. Who was accused by a woman of sexual harassment. And this woman wrote a manifesto or description of what happened. And immediately, I remember I read it. I was like, oh, Aziz Ansari.
Right, how could you say it ain't so?
Yeah, and so I read the account and I was like, wait a second. This doesn't, I mean, it's like maybe if I was like, it sounds kind of a gray area here.
Right. At the very least, right? Like at least it's somewhat gray.
Yeah, I was like, you know, this seems more like two drunk people, you know.
Right.
I mean, there were moments where the way her description, I was just like, geez, Aziz is being a sleazebag, but I don't know if I would call this like a rape or something, you know?
No.
And then, but I didn't really know what to think and I didn't really want to look into it any further. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then right away, within hours, there were newscasts and like blogs and, you know, major articles totally tearing this woman apart, saying like, you know, you had a horrible date.
Yes.
And Aziz Ansari was being a lech.
Ansari.
Yeah. Every once in a while, Berto, you manage to get me. Okay. Okay, they have another quote here from Wilbur Wright, you know, one of the Wright brothers who, you know.
Wilbur Wright. Oh, this. Okay, I thought you were making a joke. Yes, he's really one of them.
Yeah, one of the Wright brothers. And it says, I don't have time for a wife and an airplane.
Oh, geez.
So I don't know if Wilbur Wright actually said that, but that's one of the
maybe
things.
he was married and making a joke. I mean, like, come on.
Who knows? But even if it's true, it's
Wait,
like,
remember that comedian? He said, "Take my wife, please."
Please. Yeah.
Yeah, see, he put his quote up there.
I mean, yeah. Well, and again, there's nothing wrong with someone saying, I don't have time for a wife.
Sure.
There's nothing wrong with that. But there is something wrong with some of these things. So, which I'll get into more later. But
And when you're done with that, it would be good to list out all the inventors of this community that have risen to the prominence of the Wright brothers and others because of their avoidance of women.
Right. Or, you know, more seriously, all the wonderful men who have done wonderful things while having a wife and children. So it also has this thing on the internet that says, today in our current culture, Time magazine says science reveals men are idiots because men are more likely than women to take idiotic risks. Let's pause for a moment and reflect on that. So I actually looked up the Time magazine article. It's from 2014, and it's titled "Men Are Idiots." New study says. And then it says, a new analysis published Thursday shows men are more likely to engage in stupidly risky behavior than women, supporting the male idiot theory.
By the way, how much would I have to bet that if it was a credible study, those words were not used?
Well, yes, but I've seen researchers in psychology use some
terms like stupidly and
no, but
I can imagine.
But in their title, sometimes they'll take a little poetic license, and also in their theories, sometimes they'll the male idiot theory. I wouldn't doubt that maybe a researcher actually...
Because I'm thinking what usually happens is you have... Because, we've talked about this. You see this with astronomy. I see it in the field of sandals all the time, which is like someone will publish something and the actual abstract is like slight correlation found of the influence of blah, 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 bifactors copedally, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Title, Men Are Idiots.
Right. So the notion that men evolved or are socialized to take more risks, it is not crazy.
Right.
All you got to do is look at all the X Games and the stunts that people do, stunts that me and my friends did when we were kids, as opposed to the quantity of stunts that the girls did around us.
Right.
But for whatever reason, this article in Time, they call it the male idiot theory, and then it says, men are no longer revealed and then on the MGTOW site, they say, men are no longer revered or respected on the most basic level for their contributions and past sacrifices and are now reduced to idiots for that. So, and then they kind of talk about how, like, when you take risks, you actually, gain something. And so, yeah, I get it. When I read this Time magazine article, I'm like, whoever wrote this is an idiot.
Yeah.
To say men are idiots, like, what a reductive, idiotic thing to say.
Yeah.
Men are idiots because they take more risks.
Right.
Which actually, I think what they're kind of saying is it like helps men to get things. So it's actually smart to take a risk. So, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, what I find objectionable to it, it's the kind of thing that would be maybe okay. Oh, no, it'd totally be fine. I mean, let's say we're having tea as we usually do together, and there's a group of us,
and we're going our own way.
Yeah, we're going our own. We're having our tea with our little pinky raised, all of us. But the point is, we're just hanging out. There's a few of us, blah blah, and someone's like, you know what? Men really are idiots. And then example. But it's said in a way that's like the casual version of idiots and all these things, right?
Right. Joking.
But you're writing an article in a quote unquote scientific magazine.
Well, Time.
Oh, sorry. Never mind.
But supposedly...
I thought you said Scientific American for some reason.
But a supposedly, respectable magazine publication.
Well, anyways, I take your point. It's a big magazine, and you're trying to grab a headline, so of course you're going to call it Men Are Idiots, but in reality, you're doing a disservice to the point you're trying to make.
And imagine if you had an article that said Women Are Idiots.
Sure.
Just imagine, like, when you change it, you're just like, oh... No one would ever have an article that said women are idiots.
Right. But by the way, I don't know what the conclusion is of the following, but just like the Flintstones, Homer Simpson, and the Family Guy, this example are all examples of men being portrayed as buffoons and idiots.
Right.
There is a reason why all of these things can get away with it, and for the most part, no one really cares. And it's because in reality, men... for all of history have been so powerful.
Right.
And, so someone's like, yeah, go ahead and laugh at it. It's so fine. It's
right. That's the gag. Humor is unexpected and different from reality.
Yes.
If you just made The Simpsons reality, it wouldn't be funny.
Right.
The funny part is, like, isn't it funny how dumb men can be because we never really acknowledge that.
Right.
And isn't it funny to have this competent wife
because we think that doesn't exist,
because we don't really acknowledge that. It's usually the opposite in our society. That's why it's funny.
And then now someone could make an argument. I don't think that I agree with this, but someone could make an argument that because for the last 60 years or however long, shows and other media started portraying men in this way, maybe it has had a negative effect on our self-perception.
Right.
Right. That said, I look around and I don't see a lack of men going out to try to conquer the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't see a lack of respect for men. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So,
but maybe we're not seeing this. I don't know.
Well, so when I looked at the MGTOW website and I saw this Time article that they were talking about, and I was like, oh, I wonder, instead of just blowing it off, I actually looked it up, and they have a good point.
They're a good point. Yeah.
They're pointing now. It's a cherry picked example among billions of articles that are published every year, but it's a good example of how some people consider themselves to have full license to just shit on men because they're the privileged class and it's okay. And it's not okay.
And actually, I can relate. You and I have talked about this a little bit. I have experienced in my life that often more people than I would expect feel like it's okay to treat me as if I have no feelings.
Right.
Like I don't get hurt.
Right.
And it's probably partly because I do tend to give off an air of like self-confidence or like, these things don't seem to bother me on the surface.
I've analyzed you. This has been my agenda with you over the past year, or maybe even just the past 6 months, is figuring this thing out. Mm-hmm. And what I have figured out, and watching you in public, is that because of your coping mechanisms and your desire to actually be liked and to be useful to other people, you want to be the lubrication for everyone else.
Yes.
One of the worst things you can do if you want to be a lubrication in a party is to take offense to something, or to not roll with the punches,
because that halts the fun.
Everything comes to a screeching halt, and so in general, that's fine because most people aren't dicks. But occasionally, there's someone in the room who has some issue,
who's not in on the story, on the joke, and they're like. What I mean by that is,
or it's even me who I have some kind of, I don't know, issue or insecurity that is being touched on in that moment. And then I'll target you with some hurtful comment or something. And, or someone else has more mirth in them and they go, ooh, easy target. This guy I can really unleash. And then you just don't do anything, or you try to get playful with people.
Right.
And then I hear you later on, and with the sense I get from you, Berto, is the amount of anger that is inside of you that it doesn't get expressed is a lot.
Definitely. And with some things, it really does roll off me because the person doesn't mean much to me.
Right. And so you're smart enough to kind of intellectualize it.
Yeah. And I usually, in fact, internally, I'm sort of laughing about, I sort of get conceited about, I'm like, this person's level of analysis of what's actually happening is clearly not sophisticated. But in other cases, when it's someone I know and it's repeatable, it does start hurting.
And you're so good at hiding your hurt and your anger. It is unbelievable.
Right.
It's taken me 10 years to even see hints of the anger that is inside of you.
What are you talking about? Yes.
As he makes a joke about it. So anyway, so everything so far, I'm kind of like, well, MGTOW, okay, fine. You want to go your own way.
Empathize. Yeah. They have some good examples.
Being afraid of being accused of sexual harassment. Okay, the way you said it, I think is a little silly, but I get it. Okay, now let's get to the actual comments from actual members.
Right. Oh, and one quick thing. The one part so far that actually baffles me the most is when you mentioned their affiliation leaning towards the alt-right, and I'm not really baffled by this because I know why, but what's interesting about it is that there is this conception of like, what the alpha male that leads our society should be. And that alpha male better be married and sort of Christian and have a gun and a family they protect and all these things.
Well, I
and
wonder.
that's sort of like that outright conception.
Well, I wonder if that's changing though, because
might be, yeah.
you know, Trump he doesn't really give off a family,
No.
a family man. You
That's
know,
true.
Alex Jones, you know, these people don't really give off a family.
That's a fair point, right?
You know,
that's a fair point.
Okay, so comments from members. Marriage is a social construct. The differences between the sexes are innate. Unhappiness is built into the institution because of this central conflict. So, okay, you know, I don't know, not too much to say about that. It's a little sure of itself, but fine. Another one. A few months ago, there was a story about a guy in Houston who's on the hook for support for a kid that isn't his, and he proved it isn't his. Stay away from women. So you know, again, I don't doubt that there's one case or a percentage of cases where a guy is on the hook for a baby that isn't his, that he is either trying to prove isn't his, or maybe even has some evidence that it isn't his. Yeah, I don't doubt that.
And in fact, I have personally felt that we are a bit schizophrenic when it comes to, sorry, I shouldn't use random terms like that, but
of split mind.
We're of split mind when it comes to topics like what rights a father should have or a mother should have.
Absolutely.
When it comes to babies and things.
Yeah. And, you know, we socialize the men to kind of slink away in situations like that to some extent anyway. So, but anyway, these are representative of a lot of comments.
Sure.
There's a lot of comments on women trapping men with pregnancy and then forcing them to pay for it.
Right.
As if that's a life goal that some women have. Do you know what I mean? Like, yay, I can't wait to be divorced and like dependent on my ex partner to pay for my bills. Yay, that sounds like an awesome plan, you know? Anyway. So another person says, here are recaps of 2 conversations I've had with 2 married women. Okay, so I'm gonna just read the conversations as they had. You should get married and have kids, he says. No thanks, I don't need kids, and already did the marriage thing. She says, well, at least find a woman who loves you, he says. Such beings don't exist, and they're all crazy. She says, you just find the crazy ones. He says, they're all crazy. And then he says that she called him a bunch of names and was in a rage, which I'm trying to imagine like that. And then she says, okay, I agree, you are right, but that doesn't mean you have to stop searching. And then he says, yes, it does.
Wait, she got into a rage, called them names, and it all calmed back down to that?
Yeah. And then she, you know, but that doesn't mean you have to stop searching. And then he says, yes, it does. And then she calls him names in a rage, and then follows it up with, okay, you are right.
What universe did this happen in?
Yeah. So
okay, you are right. Unless that was the most sarcastic, okay, you are right.
So after this, you know, depiction of this quote unquote conversation that I'm positive did not occur.
At the very least, we're playing a game of Rashomon right here.
Yeah. Severe game of Rashomon. I expected people to comment afterwards and be like, come on, dude, like, you seem to be painting, you know.
Right.
We are on the Men Going Our Own Way website. We're not on the delusional sort of storytelling website. You know what I mean? But everyone was in full support.
Absolutely. I've run into the same thing, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. Okay. And then he says, here's the second conversation I've been in. So sorry to hear about your divorce, but these things happen and hopefully you can learn a lesson from it and move forward. By the way, like his depiction of these other people sounded extremely reasonable.
Yeah.
And then he says, so sorry to hear about your divorce, but these things happen and hopefully you can learn a lesson from it and move forward. And then he says, yes, I have. And the lesson I've learned is to never get married. And then she says, wait, no, I didn't mean that lesson. I mean to fault you for your wife's behavior. Surely there is some other reason. And then he responds with ...
Right.
So
I'm sure this person who started off politely saying, I'm very sorry for your divorce, but you know, you got to move on, blah, blah, blah. Well, no, I mean, clearly what I was meaning to say is that there's something wrong with you and you were the fault for your divorce.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but apparently she said, I meant to fault you for your wife's behavior.
Right.
Like, why would you phrase it like that? And again, no one after this is like, come on, dude. Like,
Dude, why are you painting a cartoon?
Yeah. And then people commented after this. So just some of the comments. Those women that spoke to you sounded like real cunts. Another person. One piece of advice, and this goes for everyone. Beware the virgin. I dated a girl in college for 4 years and was close to asking her to marry me. Beautiful girl. Families knew each other and got along well. The one problem, she was a virgin. The only guy she ever had sex with was me. She just had to have sex with another guy to see what it was like. That was her big reason for breaking up with me. So that's his response to this conversation. And all I can think of is, dude, like, yeah, you dated a girl for 4 years and you were in love. Right. And you wanted to, I'm guessing, spend the rest of your life with her, or at least longer than you did. And then she had sex with someone else, or she needed to break up with you because she said she needed to have sex with someone else. Now, let's assume that that's an accurate depiction.
Sure, take it at face value.
My guess is it was more nuanced than that. But certainly women will break up with men saying that, or even thinking it. It's just like, yeah, you know what? I think I just want to have sex with other people. There's nothing that strange about that.
Right.
Yeah, that sucks. That hurts. That's a massive rejection. But his conclusion is avoid virgins. Only have sex with people who've already been around the block.
Right.
Not a terrible heuristic on some level, but probably not going to give you the answer you're looking for.
Well, it is a very, very primitive heuristic, right? It's the Honda. You're my caveman friend. That bush over there, I got hurt when I went by that bush.
Don't go
by that bush.
So to speak.
Yeah.
But the other thing is like, you're hurt and you don't know what to do. And you're also, because you're socialized to compete with other men so heavily for sex with particular women, the fact that she wanted to have sex with another man is terribly threatening to your self-esteem.
Right.
Men are socialized, like, once you get a woman, like, you hold on to her, and if anyone else touches her or looks at her, you're not a man.
That's a challenge to your masculinity, to your whole being.
Right. I always, again, try to imagine you're walking, heterosexual couples walking down the street, and a woman whistles at the man.
Right.
In my, sort of suburban culture in Seattle, the woman's going to be like, like, that's funny.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of funny. Whereas if you reverse it, and same heterosexual suburban kind of average couple walks down the streets of Seattle, and a guy whistles at the woman, the man is going to feel differently.
Very threatened, right?
Yeah, and feel like, in order to be chivalrous, he has to actually go do something about it.
I will say, in other cultural pockets, the same it will be true in even the female case that you brought up. There's many videos, sadly, of
women fighting other women. Yeah, right. So
like that.
That's why I wanted to say average mainstream suburban culture, because certainly there are other. Another comment on these quote unquote conversations. If you go down any marriage route in today's society, you will be divorce raped. It's only a question of when and the degree. So this is another phrase that they say in the MGTOW community.
Divorce raped?
Yeah, divorce rape.
Got it.
Which, I just have to say, I've been with a lot of couples as they go through divorce, and there's just a formula that they follow.
Yeah.
It's just basically 50-50, know? And if you've only been married a short amount of time, they take that into account. So,
but think of it from and I'm not justifying it, if you come from this perspective that men are, because, what's going on said here, and I really think it's going on said, but it is there, is, look, let's be honest, men do run the world, and we are the best and the brightest, and blah, blah, blah. And it sucks that we are not treated that way anymore. Even we're not getting the respect we should have, blah, 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 blah. So if you're coming at it from that perspective, and you have a divorce in which you split things 50-50, you might feel, that sucks. I'm the one who earned most of that. I'm the one who blah, blah, blah. I'm the one. Why should this person be entitled to half of my blah, blah, blah? And so that would, you could translate that as I got raped.
Right. And another kind of way of looking at it, or similar to that, is that so say you have a kind of a traditional marriage where the man works and earns more money than the woman. The woman stays home with the kids early on, then tries to get kind of a part-time job later on.
In other words, she's on vacation permanently.
Yeah. And, never gets to the level and can't really go to trainings and sort of build her career because, she's kids first. And, the couple has decided that that's what they want to do. Right. Well, the messages in society are such that when the divorce happens, the man thinks he's going to take like all of his shit with him. Yeah. And what ends up happening is it gets split down the middle. Yeah. Like every dollar, every retirement fund, every piece of everything he's bought is half hers. Right. And also you have to give a little bit more to her to account for the fact that she sacrificed to take care of the kids. She sacrificed her earning potential to take care of the kids. Yeah. And so sometimes you get only 40% of the stuff. Sure. So you're handing over 60% of your retirement fund. You're handing over 60% of the house equity. You're handing over 60% of your investments. You're handing over, and you have to pay her for 5 years after marriage to get her up to speed in terms of, like income wise. That, in my experience, does not go over well with a lot of guys.
Of course not.
Because they didn't know that. They didn't know going into it that that's how the law works. No one no one told them, by the way, if you ever get divorced, because of this arrangement, you're going to give 60%. Yeah. And so there's no time for them to adjust to that.
Which this points to another problem that is definitely affecting these folk, but affects a lot of people, is that there is no training that we go through to be married, let alone to be divorced.
Right. So so there's a Reddit subreddit, of course, for MGTOW. So I went there and got some of the first comments in this one forum. This one guy said, "I own 2 liquor stores and I will not hire women. I had female employees in the past. They were mostly late, started drama, got drunk on the job, were rude to customers, stole booze, and overall lazy. I never had this problem with male employees. Women apply to my stores all the time. I simply throw their resumes out. I don't need the unnecessary drama. A lot of male business owners are no longer hiring women, especially after the Me Too movement. If you're a business owner, do yourself a favor and never hire a female." Berto, what do you think?
What's so self-fulfilling here is, first of all, imagine everyone followed this advice. Aren't they trying to, on the one hand, say, men are oppressed. We can barely do this. We can barely do that. Solution number 1, stop hiring all women. Like, how is that going to help your case?
Right. So, again, I don't doubt that this business owner had some trouble with some employees. Right. And maybe they were all women. But scientifically, that's not a representative sample. Yeah. The conclusion is women are all drunk idiots at the job.
No one should hire them. Yeah. And then the next day they're saying, why are women saying they're not getting enough jobs or getting paid equal pay?
Right.
But no one should hire women.
And then someone wrote as a joke, "Don't be so sexist. Give jobs to women. I run a brothel and a tampon testing firm, and I love hiring women. Equality, yeah." Okay, here's another comment here. "We need male solidarity more than ever. We're better people than those bitches. They don't give a fuck about us. Why don't we do more for each other?
Why do we get accused of misogyny?
It's up to us alone, brother helping brother." Okay.
All they do is accuse those cunts. All they do is accuse us of misogyny. Yeah. I want to kill them.
Another one. "Things you don't have to do once you're MGTOW. Take shit from other people. No more jumping through hoops. No more need to seek validation. You're just fine the way you are. No need to fear rejection, loss, or failure since you have nobody to let you down besides yourself. No need to impress. No need for any fancy shit."
How's this working out for them? Well, this sounds like the afterlife.
Well, okay. So, but this guy, I get, again, if that's all they're doing, so I want to value this guy. Mm-hmm. if this guy is saying things that are good about going your own way, you don't have to jump through any hoops. You don't got to seek validation. No fear of getting dumped. You don't got to, buy nice clothes. It's just like me hanging with the dudes. They don't care what I'm wearing. They don't care if I burp or fart. You know what? Like, that's what I want to do now.
Right.
Totally cool with that. If that's your deal, totally cool with that. I'm guessing you'll probably find romance more likely with that lifestyle if you're being yourself and not trying to impress all the time. My guess is it'll just actually randomly happen for you. But anyway, the point is
I
that...
see. Ironically, it's like, oh, you're being yourself now. You have a life.
Thank you for being a normal human being. You know what I mean? And stop trying to impress people all the time. But
However,
anyway,
it won't happen because they're going to be busy complaining online all day long.
Right. But I just want to say, like, there's elements of the MGTOW movement that I can absolutely get behind. There's nothing wrong with saying I want to give up on romance for a while. I want to go my own way. I want to, just take a break. I don't want to have to impress anyone. I just kind of want to relax and be myself. And this obsession that I have with dating and trying to land the right girl is not healthy for me right now. And so I get that. There's nothing wrong with that. But to say that all women are shit and cunts and can't work in a liquor store is just like, what? Okay. So what's the final word on MGTOW, Alberto?
It seems like a really fancy way for nature to prune out betas.
Anything else besides that?
No, I mean, look, in all honesty, I can absolutely relate to a lot of those feelings.
Have you ever taken a break?
No.
I mean,
From the dating scene and the women thing?
Yeah.
No. And I don't think I
Have you ever felt terrible when you were dumped?
Yeah, of course.
Would you have a hard time with that?
Yeah, but it never even crossed my mind to generalize it.
Right. That's the thing. It's like everyone's been hurt. It takes a particular sort of person to say, oh, all women are like that. And I didn't even get to the comments that basically illuminate the belief that women actually will target men to try to get them, pregnant and or to target them and date them and then accuse them of rape and because they want to sue them or what I mean. It's like, why would you go there in your head unless you were in a propaganda bubble like the fucking internet?
Right. So again, like I can absolutely relate to a lot of the sentiments of how they get to feeling this way and the things that trigger them. I also relate to a lot of the negative images in society about men, meaning even things that I laugh at and I like, but really do portray men as sort of bumbling buffoons and things. That said, I think that's where I leave those shores and I say, but the rest of it sort of starts becoming a self-fulfilling fantasy land.
Yeah. So my final thoughts, it's fine if you want to go your own way. It's also fine if you want some male friendship. It's also clear that all of these guys are hurting or afraid. And I get that. I've hurt and been afraid in the exact same way.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with those hurt, fearful feelings. It's clear that many of them are mostly shut off from other women in their lives. Actually, like there's not a lot of input from women that they respect or something, or other men for that matter.
Sure.
Actually, that's probably a better thing to say. They're cut off from normal men who have a normal reaction to being hurt, which is to, get drunk and play video games and just, I don't know, just say, well, we'll see what we can do next time. You know what I mean?
Or go to therapy.
Yeah. Or go to the dance club and be douchebags. Like there's whole other ways you could be a douchebag as a dude. You don't have to be a douchebag in this way. And it's also, I want to say that it's possible that some of these dudes are on the spectrum. Autism spectrum, that because it's so confusing, the world of social relationships, that they just have a really hard time trying to figure out what the answer is. And so now I don't know, no research, but it just seems like that would be some of the population, Again, it's totally fine if you want to give up on the romance, but I've worked with men like this. I've helped men heal from the pain. I've helped walk them through the healing process and through the discovery of masculinity as there's a very positive masculinity version out there that doesn't involve hating women.
Yeah.
It just involves being a good human being chivalrous, being honorable, being honest, being strong, whatever that means to you.
And actually, ironically, going your own way. And I say that from the perspective that when I started dating and I was a teenager, I think I've talked about this before, I had this fantasy land in my head about, okay, I guess what I have to do if I like a girl, I have to make some big grand gesture like what I see in the movies, probably write some really romantic poem for her, show up unexpectedly and recite it, and then we go on a date. And a date is I should probably just like take her to a restaurant or maybe go watch a movie. And that was the extent of my idea of what it is to...
And when she gives some pushback on sexual activity, you got to like force that to happen.
Absolutely.
Because like women want you.
Women want you.
Because those are all the messages, particularly when we were growing up.
Right. And so what I didn't know, no one taught me, no one told me, I had to learn slowly, right, is actually what works better is when you have a life. And that having a life, not just in the casual get a life, but really, what are your interests? What do you do? What do you like doing? Do that. And actually, you'll meet people that have related interests and you might actually have something in common. Like, for example, I like music, right? Well, it turns out it's a great way to meet women in the music scene, right? Or it's a great possibility to meet me. So, like, you can actually...
But the key is you didn't start music to meet women.
Right. I'm not even saying that was the way I did. I'm just saying, like, as I grew older, I realized, oh, wait a minute, it's not... Can you please go on a date with me Friday night? It's actually, hey, here's an example. I was already going to have this fun life this weekend. Do you want to be part of that? Because I do fun things. Do you want to be part of that?
Right.
And that's very different from, I need you to get in my life so I can start having fun.
Right. Exactly. And, I get it that some men are out there, they're lonely. They are... every day thinking about the fact that they don't have anyone in their life and they're sad about that.
Right.
And they hear all this advice from us, like, well, get a life and then, and women will just happen. And, they've tried that and it didn't really work and they're still suffering.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, when I ask women out, like I do all the right things and it doesn't work. And I go to the pickup artist community and they tell me these things and that kind of works sometimes. And I don't know. I just feel like all the advice is just all bullshit. I'm still here alone,
right?
With just sad.
That's fair.
And I get that, and everyone's been there on some level, and there are women out there, heterosexual women out there who are thinking the exact same thing. Yeah. It's not just dudes.
How often do we hear like, oh, I'm just giving up on men,
right.
That's a thing I hear way more frequently.
Right. So there's a very real aspect of that, and our society and friends tend to deal with it in this very superficial way. Like, just get out there, just, with all the online dating.
I never say things like that.
Oh, well people do.
I'm kidding. I was basically saying, just get out there.
But, and it's like, well, man, with all the online dating, it's so easy now. And it's not, it's
that's got to be the worst slap across the face. You jerk. I've tried that for 10 years.
Right. Not only is it hard online dating, but the ups and downs emotionally involved. You put all this emotional energy in and you get dumped frequently.
Right.
You have to dump other people frequently because you're not into them. And it's rough. And so I get it. And there's no way around the pain exactly. I actually, one of the very first psychological things I ever said, I think I forgot this until just now, is because I actually thought this when I was like 13 or 14, is that I said to people, I said, you're not a man until you get dumped. Isn't that funny that like I just forgot all about that. I remember like at the age of 14.
Wow.
Because like I wasn't into psychology until I was 25 and 24 and decided to become a therapist. Before that, I was just a regular guy and didn't think about, I didn't think I was ever going to go into psychology, you know?
Right.
But there's these little evidence, these little pieces where it's just like, I was thinking about development and, you know, and psychology in general,
Right.
you know, and one of the things I remember telling people, because I would have friends that would get dumped
And then you would cheer them up.
and would be devastated. And I would tell them like, well, now you're a man because you weren't a man before.
Right,
you were a boy.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I mean, it's funny. You can cut it both ways. I see both good and bad, but it sounds like a great way to help a friend who's feeling down about it.
Right. And also the perspective that I was trying to communicate or believed was that after being dumped, you realize that you're not the center of the universe, you know?
Yeah.
Like you realize that just because you love someone and you want to be with them forever doesn't mean that they're going to want the same thing. And before that, you think like a boy where it's just like, well, I'll just fall in love and everything will work out.
Which is, I definitely can relate to. And also there's the bad way to interpret it or take it or even mean it, which would be,
now you're jaded.
Or basically, that's the life of a man.
Always
getting dumped by the woman.
Always getting dumped. Right. Well, in essence, that is kind of what I'm, not that exactly, but I am saying, and it is a developmental stage of just realizing that life sucks sometimes.
But women have to go through the same thing.
Right, yeah.
So the bad way to
I would say that the way I would say it in general now is you're not an adult until you've been truly dumped.
That's one of the markers that you have to jump through, one of the hoops you got to jump through.
Now, I want to say there's also a whole section of people who are just not interested in romantic relationships at all, and therefore they're always children. No, just joking.
Yeah.
It doesn't, you know, so obviously you can't apply to that. But anyway, well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Thanks for joining us out there. Please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.